Hello and welcome to Coderon. Today, in this video, we are going to talk about procedures and functions in MySQL. I'll share my concept visual about the same. In the previous sessions, we discussed about database and database management system. In that, we discussed about all basic concepts, including tables, primary keys, foreign keys, rows, and other stuff. So today we'll focus on two topics. One is procedure and the other is functions. So before starting with procedures, let's try to understand what is procedure and functions. Procedure is basically a set of instructions that performs a specific task and it can return zero or more values. When we say it can return zero or more values, means it can return those values using out parameters, whereas function directly returns the values using the return clause. Now, it may or may not have parameters. It's not mandatory to have parameters for procedures, and it is usually used to perform operations that modify the databases. For example, let's see example of procedure along with its syntax. So syntax is basically a keyword. You need to use create, then procedure if you are creating procedure, and then name of the procedure. Okay. After that, you need to pass the parameters. So parameters are of two types, in parameters and out parameters. What is in parameter? In parameter is basically whatever input you are passing to that procedure is considered as in parameter, and out parameter is basically something that will be passed from that procedure to the caller. That is called as a out parameters. Okay. Now, the procedure name here you're giving, it should be unique within the database schema. Then param1 or param2 are the input parameters of the procedure. Then there is a third parameter called out param. Now, out specifies that this parameter is of the out parameter and then its data type. Every input parameter or output parameter that you are declaring, it should have the data type. Now, the important thing here is a begin and end block. These are the keyword that encloses the procedure body. So whatever business logic or business rules you want to implement, those should be inside this begin and end. Within the procedure body, you can declare or perform calculations and execute SQL statements. So what are the applications of procedures? Where we can use procedures in databases? So there are few use cases where business may need procedures. For example, if you have a customers table and to insert the rows into the customer table, you may want to use a procedure, or you may have an inventory system and to keep inventory updated, to insert the inventory records, you may want to use a procedure. You can also use procedures to generate the reports or to delete the data from tables by passing some input to the procedure or do some calculations. So there are multiple use cases and we'll see implementation of one such use case. Here in this example, we will be using the procedure to insert one record into the customer table. For that, we will connect to a database using MySQL command line utility. So I'm sharing here one example where, let me zoom this out for you so that you can see the syntax of the procedure. Syntax is similar to what we have seen. Create, then procedure is a keyword, and then name of the procedure. It has three input parameters. One is name, then second is the address, and third is a phone, along with their respective data types and data lengths. Then the begin and end block. Inside this begin and end block, you can write your logic or whatever rules you have to implement. So here I just wanted to insert a single record into the customer table. So I just wrote a simple insert into customer where I'm passing the input parameters as a values. Okay, so customer name will be the P name, that is the name that we're passing. Similarly, address and phone. Okay, after the insert statement, I'm committing my changes. You may want to commit or roll back the changes based on your condition. Okay, and after that, I'm just ending the procedure. So here, one thing to note is a delimiter. So what is a delimiter? Delimiter is basically a statement or line terminator. Now, MySQL by default uses this semicolon as a line terminator. Now, if you will not use a delimiter here, what it will do, it will consider from this line from this line to this line as a single statement. Here it will think that statement is ended and our procedure will run into error. So whenever we want to pass entire unit as a single unit to the server, we need to use a special delimiter. That delimiter can be user defined. So you can use several characters as a delimiter. So now I will copy this code snippet into the command line so that we can test this code. So I'm just pasting the code and hitting the enter button. So our procedure is created. Now let's see. In this procedure, we are trying to insert records into the customer table. Let's first check if we have any rows into the customer table. So I ran this query select star from customer and we don't see any records. Now let's try to use the procedure to insert the records into this table. How to use the procedure? You need to use the keyword call and then procedure name. Now, after the procedure name, you have to pass the input parameters. How many parameters we have? We have 3 parameters. All are in parameters. So I'm just copying the example how to call the procedure. Basically, you have to use the call keyword. Then you have to specify the procedure name and pass the input parameters. Now this is the delimiter that we have defined. See, default delimiter is a semicolon, but while creating procedure, we defined our own delimiter. That's the reason going forward for all queries, we will use this default delimiter that we have set. We can change this anytime by changing the delimiter to default delimiter, which is a semicolon. So now I'm calling the procedure. Okay, the query says it's okay and the rows affected in 0.01 seconds. So now let's run this query again and let's see if we have any data in the customer table. Okay, see the record that we inserted customer name, Mike, California, and 101. All these values with the customer name, customer address, and customer phone got inserted. So this is how we can implement the procedures and we can use those procedures in our daily DBMS applications. So we talked about procedures. Now let's talk about functions. Function is also a set of instructions that performs a specific task and returns a single value. It always has parameters. Procedure may or may not have parameters, but function at least have one parameter, and it is usually used to compute a value based on some input parameters without modifying the database. So basic purpose of the function is basically to return a value based on some computations that we are doing. It is not intended to modify any database tables, basically any object. Let's see a syntax for the function. Function syntax is similar to the procedure. Instead of procedure keyword, you need to use the function keyword, and additionally, you need to add the returns clause. So let's see the syntax. Create function, name of the function, then parameters. By default, function takes parameters as a in type, that is in parameters. So you need to specify the parameter name and its respective data type. Then note here, additionally, there is a returns clause along with the return data type. So whatever value you want to return as a function value, it may be an integer, it may be a string. So you need to specify here what this function will return, whether it will return integer or it will return a string or anything else. The rest of the block will be similar, like begin and end. So these two clauses will enclose the body of the function. So whatever logic you want to write, you can write inside the begin and end. Let's see one example. So where we can use functions in databases, we can use everywhere. I mean, we can use them in select clauses, we can use them in trigger, in where clause. Let's see one example, how we can create a function and use it in a select clause. So here I'm sharing my screen where we have written one function already, which is basically a function that will get age of the person based on the input that you will pass. Input should be the birth date of the person for which you are trying to get the age. So syntax is create function, then function name. Here the function name is get age, then input parameter is a birth date of type date. Now here this function will always return integer. That's the reason this return data type is specified as an integer. Then begin and end, these are the clauses which will enclose the body. So what is written in the body? We have declared one age variable of data type integer. We are setting age parameter where we are getting the difference in year of the past parameter birth date and current date, and we will return that age as our return value. How to use this function? Before that, let's try to see if this code works. So let's copy delimiter. We have already seen that it is basically a statement delimiter. Whenever we want to pass this entire code as a single unit to the server, we need to use this delimiter. We only use delimiter mostly in writing procedures, functions, and triggers. So let's copy this code, go to the command line utility, and see if this code is working. Let's clear the terminal, paste the code, and hit the enter button. Now it says the query executed successfully. Now let's try to use this function into the select clause. How to do that? Here I already written on the board. Let's copy that. It's basically a select command. It's basically a select command which is calling the function that we have created. So let's copy this, copy, and go back to the terminal. Okay, instead of semicolon, since we have defined delimiter as double forward slash, we will use that as a semicolon. So instead of using a semicolon, since we have defined delimiter as double forward slash, we need to use that. So here, after calling this function by passing the birth date, it is returning the age of the person right now. Okay, so this is how function works. So we have discussed both procedures and functions. The main difference between procedure and a function is that a procedure does not necessarily returns a value, while a function always returns a value. Additionally, the procedures are usually used to perform DML operations that modifies the database, while functions are used to compute values based on input parameters. With this difference, we're about to end our session. Thank you so much for joining me today and watching this session on procedures and functions. Also, I'm excited to announce that we have a new video coming out soon on triggers in MySQL. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss out when it's released. Thank you.